Alright, and welcome back to God of War 3 Remaster Walkthrough. And this is behind the scenes part 2. I think we'll be able to finish it. And then I'm going to give my final verdict of everything that I've seen. So, let's get back to it, I guess. Let's go back to the combat because I think we ended in an awkward spot. And these guys deserve to hear their...
The role
Sure.
of a combat designer on God of War 3 is a complex role. Basically has anything to do with characters in the game. Any character you see moving in the game, attacking, fighting, are generally implemented by the combat designer. And then, of course, Kratos. What his platforming elements are going to be, what his new combat moves are going to be, what weapons he's going to use, how he's going to use them, how he walks, everything. I'm here with Jason McDonald, who's a senior combat designer on God of War 3. And we're just talking about the new features that we have in the game and what we're trying to add to the God of War franchise.
Well, we've got some of Kratos' items in. He can grab a head and he can light stuff up. Now that we can play with lighting in God of War 3, we can make the entire room dark, have enemies that are attacking you in the dark, can't be seen. And when you light them up with the head, they light up for a limited amount of time, so you can attack them while you can see them, but then they are constantly disappearing.
You get to parts where it's completely pitch dark and you hear the guys scream in the background. You use the Helios head to, find out where they are. The strategy gameplay, the combat side of it turns into you have to keep these guys lit to be able to hit them, otherwise you get screwed and they just destroy you in the dark. So
Definitely something we couldn't do before, just because we didn't have dynamic lighting to the extent that we have now. So
we got the combat grapple in.
we tried the grapple stuff in God of War 2, but since we were limited on memory and animations and things like that, we just couldn't do it, and if we couldn't do it well, then we weren't going to do it at all, so we just didn't do it. But now we have more space, more memory. Kratos is a very strong character, so when he grapples an enemy, he kind of just charges right in and plows through everybody. So the grapple system is exactly like that. You can launch somebody in the air and you grapple them and you ply yourself right into the air, right into them. If there's a crowd of enemies, you'll ply yourself through all of them.
Hey, I'm at Brian Desk here. He's a senior combat designer on God of War 3.
For this particular boss, which is a huge scorpion, you want to make sure the presence is there and the player will feel the power of the attack. Usually for attacks for boss character, you want them to be really recognizable so the player know it's coming, because if the player cannot recognize the move and react in time, they get hit, because it's boss character, you will take a lot of damage. So it's not fun, if you don't see the attack coming, you're being hit. So that's something that we try to work really hard on.
I'm here with Jason DeHarris, combat designer on God of War 3. And we're just looking over some of the writable stuff that's early in development. So how do you think it's going?
It's all right in terms of Kratos. He still wants to kill this beast that's in his way to his ultimate goal. So it's not really his friend. So he's not really telling it to attack. He's just trying to kill it, and then the indirectness of that is the Cyclops reacting to his pain, pretty much. But then there's a challenge of making it feel responsive as well. So I guess it's kind of disguising that responsiveness with the pain reaction. So even the pain reaction is really a hit, actually.
As you can see, we got a bunch of grunts on screen right now. And when you're fighting all these grunts, like taking on, doing a special move or grabbing each one and killing them, that can be kind of slow. This will be an awesome tool for, like, you see the Cyclops in there, and you're just like, I want to get after the Cyclops so I can jump on his back and do tons of damage and kill these guys quicker. But just like any other feature, we have to prove that it's going to be fun and good. And, if it's not, we got to get rid of it, because everything has to be fun.
Yeah, it's really fantastic comeback. They nailed it. They really did. Even if the game sucked, as long as they had fantastic comeback, it would have sold well.
When we're starting to do an environment, we'll receive a concept from our concept artist. And they do this elaborate, crazy drawing that looks really cool. And then from that, design already has their design laid out. It's basically like a sheet. You just a bunch of blocks and boxes that gameplay's already in there, it already works. From there, we go over it and we start building our level with it. We layer on geometry, the hills, mountains, whatever's going to be in there, and incorporate all that into the sheet so it all plays together nice and make it look pretty.
Every corner in the game is pretty much unique. It's handcrafted. That's the difference. You look at other games, it's an assembly line, it's mass produced. They'll build a crate and then you'll see that exact crate hundreds of times throughout the game. You don't get that in God of War.
Good people here. Everybody's really talented, super talented, but nobody has an ego or anything like that, so it's great. Well,
What's gratifying for me is coming in every day and actually liking the job that I'm doing. You know, I bore my girlfriend with, you know, how I'm gonna, you know, make this piece of metal like even sweeter. I enjoy talking about it. She hates it.
biggest challenge is getting it done on time.
You lose sense of what starts to look into you, and you actually need other people's eyes to tell that. And I think working with a team of guys that are always open to giving you advice and telling you, hey, this looks great, or hey, maybe this could be worked on a little bit, really makes the art come out to look a lot better.
I'm going to show you an example of how we do collision. So here's the basic level that we're working on right now. And then we have the stuff we call sheet, which is the real basic collision stuff that Kratos walks and runs on. So this is actually built by a designer. This gives us the basic places where he needs to run and defines kind of the gameplay spaces. And then we build our art over that. So what we then have to do at a later point in development is go in and make sure there's a cylinder around here and there's a cylinder around here, and that we make sure that we put in little divots into this collision so that he doesn't get stuck on things or walk through things. And then here you can see where he is walking, there is collision. But if you look carefully right now, because the sheet isn't actually finished, his feet move through little places in the ground and things like that. And because like there's wall, we have collision right there, he can't go through this wall, but we don't actually have any collision on this pillar, so he's gonna go weep and walk right through. So eventually that's what we'll have to do, is make sure that all that stuff is in there and that he can't walk through these pillars, and that's what collision is.
This is concept by Cecil Kim, and it's the exterior of the top of Mount Olympus with the Zeus statue there, and that's where you're going to be fighting Zeus. And this is another piece that I asked Cecil to do for me, and it's a top-down of the ground. That's when concept art really comes in handy, because we have to do so much ground that Kratos is transitioning over that it's really nice to get some fresh ideas. And I'll take his drawing here and then start fleshing it out and coming up with crazy marble and gold. And he had this cool feather idea. You get dirt and stuff picking in between the feathers, adding, I guess, an extra layer of filth to the world. You build it clean first, and then I'm going to go in here and destroy it and make it look like a fresh battle has happened in it.
Neat.
So here's an example of a piece in Tartarus. This is a gate that basically raises up on these chains from the side. This is a pretty detailed piece from what we would normally get from a concept artist. We'll get, you know, big vista shots, and then if it's an important piece, we'll get something like this to sort of detail out what it should look like. So this is what I'll get. My first step after that is to figure out these shapes in 3D. I'll create something like this. This is just a wireframe, you know, just like any video game. You know, nothing too special about it. We bring this into a high poly modeling program to really add a lot of the detail and like the grit and the texture. This works a lot like real clay. You can see how I can just sort of work over it and obviously not be that sloppy, but that allows me to get all this detailing and stuff in. Once we get it to that point, we end up getting all that high poly detail as a texture. And you can't really see it too well on here, but I brought it up on this screen. You can see how a lot of that high detail gets transferred on there. That's really kind of one of the big cornerstones of all this next-gen stuff.
This is one of the Hades levels. You can see right here, it consists of a large room and then a series of halls with little torch things in there. This is pre-lit, this is just the polygons. In this game, we are pushing a lot of polygons. The environments are, at least this one is probably twice the size of a God of War 2 level in terms of polygons, and probably 4 times larger in textures. If you look at the screen here, this is the level after it's been initially lit. You see we have a nice bloom going on now, which we just got. So you can see the softness that you have along all the lights. Before, lighting used to be really harsh. The bloom just gives it kind of this real world foggy effect. Just gives the scene a nice softness to it. Gives it kind of a cinema quality. Eventually his lighting will match the environments and it'll look really nice.
What I've been working on lately is building the environment for a movie trailer. So it's been a little different than building a regular environment. I've imported the camera and I scrub through what the camera's going to see, and I just make sure my environment fills in all the gaps. This is the base layer of what will ultimately be a pretty dense forest. This is constantly what I do. I'll just scrub through the animation, see where the camera goes, make sure I have enough detail in certain areas. If I don't have enough detail, or if you see obvious seams, I'll either cover those up or I'll consider how fast the camera's actually flying through this, and will it all be blurred out anyway, and I won't worry about it. This scene is a little more detailed than a regular environment would be, just because it is a rendered movie. So that's the end of this camera, and then it continues on.
This is the concept that we get, and basically this is an overall of the entire level. It's a big cave, and you have these rock pillars. You got your cave with the waterfalls. You know, it has little details in there, but it gives you the whole picture. You get your rocks, the greenery, the waterfalls, and then the architectural bridges. This is basically the sheet that we get from the designers, and that's the basic layout that we start with. And from there we start building the actual rock and geometry on top of the sheet. You have gameplay that you can go along with as you're building your levels to see exactly where the camera views are going to be and what you need to build out. Here's an example of where I start. I have all these rocks. This is going to be a whole rock level. You have a massive level on scale compared to any of the other ones we did in God of War 1 and God of War 2. And it's all very detailed rock geometry. It takes a long time to cut all this stuff in and make it look pretty.
Here we have the original concept art that was for the grate that I designed and modeled in 3D. So here in ZBrush, obviously, I added some rope detail. Whether it was a rope or not in the concept, it looked I tried to get as close as possible, so I just assumed it would be a rope. So that's what I did here, and obviously we have some of the nails going inside. This is what it came out to be. We knew we wanted a different color than what we had in the original concept, so you notice the color is a little different. We could actually bring it up to the PS3, and we can take a view of what it would look like at game. So back here is like the original model, and then here is the detailed version of that.
This is one of the pieces of concept art for the Olympus hub at the top of Mount Olympus. I'm in the process of arting it. You can see a lot of stuff is still just the gray block-in pieces, but starting to get some of the detail. Pretty much the way they have our tools set up, anything I build here, I can within reason quickly send it over to the development kit. I can send the entire level over so I can run around and play and interact with the environment. I can also take chunks of the environment, send them over just so I can kind of view a specific section that I'm working on. Still a lot of the gray areas I need to go in and fill in the details. You can see this down here still all needs to be done. This is kind of our art sheet version, which kind of block in the basic shapes and spacing and everything. These things we put in our level, they're scale versions of Kratos that we use just to make sure we're keeping our scale correct when we're building the stuff, so details don't get too out of whack.
Man, and level design.
To me, level design basically is creating an interactive narrative within each level that the player can engage in and essentially play through.
Level design is taking the story and premise of the game and then translating it into a more tangible form that the player can experience.
Basically kind of figuring out how to lay out the gameplay to, always have the carrot dangling in front of the player's head and kind of get them to the next part. What do you think?
I think that sounded amazing.
The script is pretty well written out, so you get a really good written description of what's going on, like what Kratos is doing, what's happening in the story. You just kind of go from there.
I get a lot of flack because I said that we put the fun in the game, and I think that's really what we do in a nutshell.
One of the greatest things about game design is that you're able to take an idea that's in your head and make someone go and experience that.
We have so many tools in this universe and so many tools as far as what the game is built off of that we can pretty much do what we want. You know, we're limited by our imagination, and I think that's one of the most fantastic things about working on this project.
As a designer here at Sony, you can't just be good at one thing. It's really in our hands to do it all and do it well. We often try to integrate the puzzles into the exploration of the level and with the combat. You're going to have a lot of games where all of a sudden you're in your fight mode, and once that's done, you're in your puzzle mode, and it almost feels like you're playing two different games. One thing we try really hard to do here is to mesh those different kinds of game designs so we get a really more fluid and dynamic gameplay experience.
From the player's perspective and serving as the ambassador to them. So we need to protect their interests and make things easily understandable for them as they're playing through the level. Do you agree?
It's a constant push-pull as well with the designers and the artists, because the artist may want to put something that's visually more interesting in, but it could also impact the play space in a negative way.
I can't emphasize enough how important playtesting is to our process. If we didn't have it, the game would not be what it is. Because when the player takes the product home, we don't want them to be frustrated.
You learn so much just watching people play it. That's one of the most valuable things you could ever do, is just sit down, give the person the controller, and just watch them play, see what they do.
I think one of the strongest things that this team has actually is having, you know, the game director come in and play it, have members from all the disciplines sitting down, and because everybody, you know, chips in, hey, how are we going to animate this? Animators are sitting in. How are we going to build this? You know, world builders are sitting in. Is this even possible? Coders are sitting in. That process makes everything just improve immensely, and I truly, truly mean that. I think a lot of people will say that, but here, it's extremely, extremely, extremely noticeable.
And this is some ideas that I had for a grapple section where basically Kratos would grapple onto a broken column, and that would cause it to fall over, and he would be rolling down the hill with it and climbing up. Kratos hits a grapple point, swings around this column, lands on the backside, which has it to tilt over. It starts rolling down a hill, and he has to scurry up it using his climb. He gets on top and then jumps off to land on a platform before the thing rolls off a cliff. So that's kind of just some of the stuff that we think. And when we talk about big moments, this is some of the stuff that we deal with. I have no set process. I'll go from paper to computer to design sheet and then back to paper. It's really kind of organic. I love this idea. There was another version where we had a Titan actually holding onto it and like eating as it's rolling down, like trying to bite you like it's a piece of corn. That unfortunately didn't make it into the game, but one of the things is just because I love an idea doesn't necessarily make it the best fit for the game, and being willing to understand that and walk away from certain things that don't necessarily fit, you know, that's part of the job.
This is my grandpa's old man puzzle. It's one of these kind of puzzles you got to figure out how to kind of put it together, but this kind of gave me some inspiration for the Labyrinth. So the Labyrinth is like this level where there's all these different cubes, and they're kind of like strung up throughout the cave entrance. And they're all like on these pulleys and ropes, and then as you go around the level, you kind of start slowly forming your own puzzle that you're gonna then go into. We came up with this idea for Gaia coming up to this rotunda where, you know, Zeus and Kratos are kind of having their last epic fight. And the player's thinking, you know, it's, you know, mano a mano, they're just gonna be battling, and then Gaia kind of comes into the picture and then ends up actually like physically ripping the whole building up and then like looking at it, and then you guys start fighting inside of it. She comes up and then like rips it off, and then she, you know, comes up and crushes it and takes it apart. At the end, you guys are like fighting inside of her, and you end up killing her, and then she kind of blows up and crumbles all over Mount Olympus. For me, it's always like so amazing to be able to imagine this whole kind of crazy scenario, this whole world in your head, and then you're actually able to make it.
I've been working on the Aphrodite Chamber, which is where one of the infamous lovemaking mini-games will be taking place within the larger game. This is the preliminary room that I brought up in Maya. Roughly what's going to be happening is Kratos is going to be going through a hallway here where he's going to come to this room. There's going to be a bed in the corner with curtains drawn, and as soon as he casts them open, he's going to see Aphrodite with two of her very lovely servant girls who quickly run away. She's going